What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be continuing our attachment breakdowns in Battlefield 6 with the laser attachments, and also we're going to throw the flashlight in here, and there will be a little bit of talk about the short barrel as well, because the primary benefit you tend to gain with lasers is to our hip fire spread, and those other attachments also help in that area, so of course I do want to see how they stack. But those aren't the only characteristics of the lasers. In fact, one of the big characteristics, which is actually a downside with a laser, is its visibility to enemy players. So let's start the breakdown off with the downside with these lasers, so you know what you're trading to gain the power that we'll look at in just a little bit. And the first laser we're going to look at here is the red laser, because in the menu it states that it's not visible to enemy players, and I just wanted to see if this is actually the case in game. And as we can see here, it's effectively invisible. If you're literally like touching the enemy player, you can kind of see the faintest red glow, but in any realistic situation in a game, no, you're never going to see that laser at all. So the description is more or less accurate for that. You don't have to worry about your visibility when using the red laser. Next, let's have a look at the green 5 milliwatt laser. This one should be the less bright version of it because the other one's the 50 milliwatt laser. And as you can see here with the 5 milliwatt, there's now a very visible laser beam that's projecting out for enemy players. And the beam itself is projected out about 5 meters or so. And that's important to know if you are using the lasers. If you're not looking directly at an enemy and you're worried about enemies knowing about your position just due to the fact that your laser is pointing around a corner, for instance, well, it turns out you really only have to worry about that 5 meter range when it comes to that specific instance. And what that means in practical terms is you generally just don't want to be hugged right up against the corner of something because your beam will be projecting out 5 meters. Whereas if you were to just take a few steps back, so you're about 5 meters away, now the enemies aren't going to see that laser beam projected around the corner. So that's actually really important information to know if you are planning on using a laser, especially one of the visible ones. In saying that though, that doesn't mean the overall visibility is just 5 meters on this. If the enemy can see you and your character model, and more specifically, if your laser is pointed in their direction, you can see there's quite a bright glow, especially if they're up close and personal, and as they continue backing off, this gets more and more dim, out to about 20 meters or so, and anything beyond around 20 meters, they're not going to be seeing anything notable at all when it comes to your laser. Now, realistically, in these scenarios, they're likely already seeing your character model, but this might make you just a little bit easier to spot, especially in a darker environment, compared to if you weren't using the laser attachment. And perhaps it even gives them a little bit of an easier target to focus on as well, with that bright laser present. Now, like I said, that was just the 5 milliwatt green laser. Now let's look at the 50 milliwatt green laser. And as we can see here, I was very surprised by this. It looks identical to the 5 milliwatt from a third-person perspective. So as far as I can tell, at least with all my testing, there is no additional visibility downside to using the higher level of laser. It's going to look literally exactly the same to enemy players as the 5 milliwatt laser. The beam still only projects out 5 meters, and when looking directly at the character model, it's just as bright up close, and it fades away at the same rate as you back off, and it essentially disappears around 20 meters. So that was quite surprising, but that's just the green lasers. What about the blue lasers? Well, let's start this off with the 50 milliwatt blue laser, and we see the exact same behavior as the green laser. It's just blue now, of course. So the beam itself projects out around 5 meters. Anything beyond that, the enemy will not be seeing the beam itself. And if they're looking directly at you, it's nice and bright up close, and it fades away as you get farther away, out to about 20 meters. And once again, just like in the case with the two green lasers, using the higher powered blue laser, the 120 milliwatt blue laser, looks exactly the same from an enemy's perspective as the 50 milliwatt blue laser. So visibility-wise, that's all you really need to know about the lasers. However, I also said we'd be covering the flashlight here. So let's have a little section on that with its visibility. And as we can see here, the flashlight is quite bright. I mean, part of its purpose is to blind enemy players. Of course, the downside to this is you're also a lot easier to spot when using the flashlight. One key thing to point out here, though, is unlike with the lasers, there's no focused beam coming out of the flashlight. And as a result, if you're around a corner, you're not going to be seeing a beam of light projected around that corner unless you're aiming at like the floor or a wall or something. They can see where the light is hitting, but if you're just aiming out into the air around the corner, they're not actually going to be able to see your flashlight unless it's like right on the edge of that corner. So that is one visibility benefit of using the flashlight over lasers. Next, let's have a look at its ranges, and as you can see right up close and personal, it is very blinding. It's super bright, and especially when there's movement and stuff going on in practical situations, I actually do find it makes it a lot harder to track those targets And it's so bad that on controller, I actually thought that this flashlight was maybe disabling aim assist or something. However, in my testing, no, that's not the case. Your aim assist works exactly the same as it does when they're not using the flashlight. But that just goes to show that it actually does make it a little bit difficult to track somebody that's moving around a lot and using the flashlight, at least in really close quarter situations where you're practically blinded. And the flashlight is visible out to a much longer range as well. Like even out to 50, 60 meters, you can still faintly see that flashlight. Obviously, at these ranges, it's not going to be having any negative impacts on you when someone's aiming a flashlight at you. And if anything, the downsides are on the flashlight user's end because they're just a little easier to spot, especially with a dark background. But that's pretty much it when it comes to visibility. However, I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, what if you combine a flashlight and a laser, since you can do this? And this is what it looks like. You just see both of them, quite simply. So you will have that laser beam projecting out. If you're looking directly at the enemy, the flashlight is quite blinding, and you'll just see a slight blue or green tint to that flashlight, depending on the color of laser that they're using. Also, it is worth noting, with either the flashlights or the lasers, you can manually turn these off at any time in the game by simply pressing down on the D-pad for controller by default, or T on mouse and keyboard by default. However, when you toggle them off, you also lose any of the benefits that they gain until you turn it back on again. Now, let's quickly cover the aim down sight spread benefits with the blue lasers specifically, since these are the only lasers that improve this. What they say is they improve your aim down sight accuracy slightly when moving. And aim down sight accuracy is your aim down sight spread or bloom or dispersion, whatever you want to call that. And while it is a bit difficult to test and isolate, especially while moving in a very controlled environment, all I did here with my tests is I strafed at maximum speed sideways while holding down the trigger and not trying to control the recoil at all. I understand this doesn't perfectly show what's going on here, but it's the best test I could think of in this case, where I'm able to at least somewhat control the important variables. And honestly, looking at the differences here, I'm not seeing anything too extreme. Perhaps with the initial shots fired, you can see using the blue lasers will give you a slight benefit to that spread. There's a little bit less dispersion there with those first few shots fired. And who knows, perhaps in a real situation where you are strafing back and forth in a gunfight, you will be able to feel the difference a little bit more. But at least as far as I can tell here, this isn't like a major difference, like it totally eliminates spread or anything. And now that we have that covered, now let's get into the meat of things, what the lasers are primarily used for. And this is for improving our hip fire. Now with this, I had a look at our hip fire values in two different states. First off, while just standing still normally. And second, while firing our gun, I just wanted to see how bad the hip fire would get, since as you continue firing, the hip fire spread will continue increasing. So I found the frame with the maximum spread value while firing with each of these lasers, as well as the base gun for control. And let's have a look at the results here that I found. The flashlight has no impact on the actual spread itself, which is not a surprise. It doesn't state that it does in the menus. With the red laser, this gives us a 20% reduction to our hip fire spread. For both the green 5 milliwatt and the blue 50 milliwatt laser, they have the same impact to our hip fire spread at a 35% reduction. Then for the higher intensity versions, the green 50 milliwatt and the blue 120 milliwatt lasers, these will improve our standing spread by 45%. And then I just wanted to throw the short barrel in here as well, at least on the M4. While I did test a laser on multiple guns, and this was consistent across all of the guns I tested, for the short barrel, this is just on the M4. It may change based on the gun, but it's just not the primary focus of this video. What I was able to find here is we see a 20% reduction to our standing hip fire spread with that. Now, of course, the short barrel will stack with these lasers as well, and therefore to see the best standing hip fire spread with the M4 at least again, if we combine the short barrel with either the green 50 milliwatt or the blue 120 milliwatt laser, we're going to be seeing a roughly 54% reduction to our hip fire spread while standing. And that's a pretty crazy reduction. You can see the spread is very tight there. And keep in mind, with all of my testing, I actually put my FOV value at the minimum. And this just makes those hip fire spreads appear larger on your screen, but it's just a perspective thing. You might be wondering why your hip fire spread looks a lot smaller in game. That's likely just due to the fact that you have a higher FOV, and I normally play at a higher FOV as well. But that covers it for our standing hip fire spread, which realistically isn't the most important value to be looking at because you're not firing your gun and therefore you're not dealing damage. With our maximum spread while firing our gun and standing, these are the values I was able to find. It turns out the flashlight actually improves this here. It says it helps with our hip fire recovery. And while I tested how long it takes to go from our maximum spread to recover back to our minimum spread, and there was a negligible difference here between the base and the flashlight, what the flashlight did do though, is it prevented the hip fire spread from increasing drastically while firing, and therefore it reduces our maximum spread while firing by roughly 17%. Next, with the red laser, we see a roughly 10% improvement, which is 50% of the improvement that we saw while standing still, and this trend continues as we go on. With the green 5 milliwatt or the blue 50 milliwatt, we see a roughly 17% improvement to our spread while firing. Then with the higher intensity lasers, we see a roughly 22% improvement to our maximum spread while firing. The short barrel gives us a roughly 10% improvement. Then with that combination of the short barrel and one of the higher intensity lasers, we see a roughly 29% reduction to our hipfire spread. And then finally, since the flashlight is helping here, even though it doesn't help when standing still, I wanted to throw that on this combination as well. And with this, while firing, we see a 45% reduction to our spread compared to not having any of these attachments on while firing. And that is a huge reduction. You can have an extremely accurate hipfire build if you combine these three attachments: the short barrel, one of the higher intensity lasers, whether that's the green 50 milliwatt or the blue 120 milliwatt, doesn't matter. And then on top of that, the key here is the flashlight because it's helping while firing. And there we go. That's pretty much it. That's going to wrap it up for our breakdown of the lasers, as well as the other main hipfire attachments in the game. And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the laser balance in the game currently? Do you guys think the visibility of the lasers is appropriate? Do you think the higher intensity lasers should actually look like higher intensity lasers in the world? And what are your thoughts on how good you're able to make hipfire in this game when combining these attachments? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.